You are a man. Shut the fuck up.
Nigga, do you got something you want to say?
Don't worry about me, I'm a god.
Hello strawbesties. I know the title either must have shocked you or got you pumped up. Last time I did this video on NINI'S, I remember it was well received, which surprised me. Of course I'm aware of my subscribers' dislike for the direction that ethnicity took their music, but if I'm being honest, the video was more so self-indulgent. It was more made for me as a fan and what it was like to see ethnicita's entire brand be changed in real time. A sort of collapse on film. I never expected for it to be so wildly loved as well. A lot of people asked for a sequel, but I wasn't sold on making one because these videos require me being deeply invested in a group. They have to be on my stan list and be spiraling as a group so bad that I'm left in the ashes of every release. Unfortunately, we have found that today with 4th gen girl group, weeekly. Weeekly is another 4th gen group that I stand on debut and stuck beside even when their releases were hot and cold with their target audience. My bias is key. However, with their recent release Play Game, Awake, I have finally found myself in the position I did with ethnicita's Guess Who, in which a group that I widely enjoyed with everyone now became the punching bag amongst the community. However, unlike ethnicity, for some reason I find people way more satisfied in blaming themselves for the travesty that was this concept switch rather than the company itself. This is why I wanted to make this video. I almost feel a need to remind my fellow K-pop stans that indeed, what happened to weeekly is not our fault, and that anyone who convinces you that it is essentially feeding into the same thing they despise. Being a company stan. I find it quite funny that even in the second video, I now have to point out how their music played a part in their downfall and how it quite literally had nothing to do with the audience itself. I think it's quite insane that music is not made anymore with the intention of at least trying to make art, but simply stocking songs for solely monetary reasons. Recently, my best friend Xumi said that the reason 4th gen does not sit right with them is simply because most groups make music that ages too quickly. I'd unfortunately put weeekly in this category. I personally think since the beginning, weeekly's B-sides have included some of the most dated pop I've heard in recent years. It confused me because I never felt this way listening to their older sister group, A-Pink. A-Pink is a group whose B-sides I didn't come to appreciate simply because their titles were too good. If you do a deep dive, you begin to realize that the girls have such a solid sound that doesn't lose its cute, sugary feel, all while still feeling sonically acceptable for your ears. While A-Pink B-sides leave me reminiscent for a time I was young and having fun in spring, weeekly's B-sides don't do much of anything. I always feel like weeekly's B-sides tiptoe too frequently in the playing at Hollister section for a group whose titles are always so energetic and essentially timeless. I wouldn't call these songs bad, but I certainly do feel as if they are throwaway tracks. Songs just stuffed into an album simply because we need to pad the runtime for it to be considered a full project. There's nothing of substance in these cotton candy pristine tracks. They don't evoke much of anything in you. Now, to be fair, I personally think there are a lot of 4th gen groups that fit this description as well. However, I think another reason as to why I take it so personally with weeekly is because just like weeekly, the girls' abilities are not being taken into account, nor are they being given the chance to grow. Soojin almost always has the worst part in every song. The producers have this super weird boner for her and maxing up the auto-tune to 1000 whenever she's in the booth that the other girls either don't get or is made less noticeable. Her, June, Chi and Zoa are also almost always getting the same exact parts in weeekly's songs. These weird throwaway talk raps that do nothing for no one. I think what makes it more odd in weeekly's case is that these throwaway lines are given as much space in the song as the singing parts. You see, in most groups, throwaway raps are even condensed into verses and typically they are done by one person, although there are exceptions. I'm not sure why it's done this way, but it immediately lowers the quality of every song they do for me. I'm surprised I don't see people bring it up more the way Orbits are vocal about the poor line distribution when it comes to Vivi, Gaowan, and Yojin. I'd argue that it's even worse in weeekly's case. There's 7 girls and enough time in a track to make everyone have their moment, and yet time and time again, the producers seem satisfied with having Soojin, June, Chi and Zoe say the most pointless, Unremarkable lines that add nothing to the song and just pads the runtime until Soan, Jihan or Monday comes in to sing. It's almost insulting to see. It's not surprising to me that the songs that I think are good but immediately ruined by some awful part, more than one time, have been one of their parts. It's almost as if the producers had no idea what to do with them. This outdated sound was already going to turn a large audience off to weeekly and make them a title-only sort of group. I think why every K-pop act right now is trying to make the pop-punk thing work, and failing miserably at it, might I add. Weekly's B-sides simply do not have enough bite to even compete in this rising trend. Not to mention, the songs being stuffed with parts that make it genuinely unlistenable at moments. No one wants to buy an album in which you come out feeling like the title track is the only selling point of it. It's why people always immediately put their faith in any project SM Entertainment releases. Even if the title track is good, and more times than not, it will be, the B-sides are guaranteed to be better or at least provide you with an equally good time. I come out of weekly's discography feeling like I just came from Christian summer camp. It sucks. A way to fix this is to simply just follow the route of the title. It's why their self-titled track Weekly in their Weekend era is one of my favorites from them of all time. The energy and sound of that track matches Zigzag to a T. It's bursting of cute, cheery voices, an instrumental that's straight out of a good Disney musical and combines to represent the group perfectly. Right now Weekly is just making a condensed version of what every other cute girl group has done before. They are pushing the sound forward, which leads me to my next problem. K-pop stans are their own worst enemy. Is nobody supporting Weekly because we hate cute concepts, or are people not supporting Weekly because there might not be anything special here? I think we as cute concept connoisseurs need to start expecting more from the concept itself rather than insisting everything that comes out with a cute concept is indeed perfect, flawless and the victim of gay pop stans being girl boss demons who won't give them a chance. If Weekly's music followed through with its pristine roots, I would imagine Weekly's album sales wouldn't have remained in the pit so long. That's ultimately the worst part of Weekly's music. It revives a long-dead promising sound that Pristin brought to the scene, but unlike Pristin, does not expand or wish to bring anything new to it. It's why, unlike ITZY, I didn't do a section about what Weekly's sound is. They essentially don't have one if we're being honest here.
Speaking of rookies, Weekly. Step to the table. We need to talk. Why is it that Weekly always has that one part of the song that completely ruins the entire song? The song be so good, then we get up to that one part, and it's just like, what are you talking about? What did y'all do? How did y'all sit in the studio? Y'all sat in the studio, y'all listened to that, and y'all still put that in the song. Explain that to me. Somebody has to run that to me real quick.
Not to keep bringing ITZY up, but it's so amazing to see two groups with entirely different concepts and sound go through essentially the same thing. Death of the artist by brand recognition. I'm going to be touching on many things in this section, but I do want the focus to be that these components are what make Weekly, and without these components, how it renders the group essentially pointless. Ever since the release of the teasers, people have been worried about Weekly's concept switch and have expressed dissatisfaction with it. In response, Dales, Weekly's fandom, claims two things. 1. You guys are not real fans, all you stream is after school. You let their cute titles, especially holiday party, flop, and therefore it's essentially your fault for the concept switch. 2. Weekly's concept switch was due to their lore, which has always been in their previous releases. Now, in this section we are going to speak solely about the second argument. I will be touching on the first point more later though. I have to ask the general audience, are you aware that Weekly had a lore? Am I the one informing you of this? I probably am. I apologize, thoroughly. I've unfortunately come to the realization that K-pop stans will simply accept anything as lore as symbolism even if it's lazy, poorly shown and quite literally not made the main focus. This is the case with Weekly. Tales are on Twitter making wild claims that Weekly has always had lore and that we all just did not pay attention. While I agree that Weekly has always had lore, I laugh at the hilarious notion that it's the general audience's fault for not digging to find meaning in the meaningless versus the director, the company and the creative director's fault for not putting more effort to show this so-called lore. The storyline Weekly has weaved amongst these releases are Wattpad-worthy at best and visually, amateur at best. The symbolism in their story is so painfully generic that it's impossible to pick up on unless you're just that deeply invested. No shot in their music video represents something deeper. They are simply there to sing. The lore in question only kicks into place visually around the bridge and ending of these music videos. Not to mention, the entire reason of a group's lore is to explain the stakes of the universe they live in and how it impacts the group itself. We never get this Weekly, and that's why I reject the notion that we have just been dense while watching their releases. If people can't tell Weekly has an overarching lore, that's definitely their fault and not ours. I find it so insulting if I'm being honest. It's badly written lore and lore that gives you not reason to be invested in it. With that being said, do you see how pointless it is for this group, who had a cute concept, due to a drastic concept switch? Because if said more than literally nobody was taking serious to begin with. The most ever heard about this lore before this point was simply the planets reference in every music video and them leaving into the galaxy door in After School. I was there for this release and can confirm that most people just assumed that meant their school concept was over. That's not lore. Not everything that is symbolism automatically means there's some sort of ongoing story to it. I find Blinks have the same syndrome as well with giving meaning to visual symbolism that in no way is supposed to be some overarching story. In How You Like That, Rosé says look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, and behind the girls for the entire music video, is a statue that seems to resemble Icarus. If you're a sane person, you'll say that they were clearly just referencing Icarus and his fall. However, I remember at the time running into whole theories about the piece and how it's supposed to be a representation of the girls at YG Entertainment and how they'll succeed regardless of the men who seem to stand in their way. I think while this tale of women overcoming sexism is beautiful, it's nonsensical to even imagine being truthful when you compare it to the rest of the music video. It's simply visual symbolism. An idea was there, but it's not meant to have some story that you walk away with. Compare this to Luna, who also included a Nicholas reference with visual symbolism in their work, but since we are aware of the stakes of the universe and have been given backstories to these characters, the reference is meant to be another piece in this story and not an idea that works within one release, or one moment of a music video. The only thing we learn about weekly is that they each represent the day of the week and they have representative planets. However, the day of the week part is emphasized way more. Of course we have Monday, but for the uniform these are all of Weekly's official days. Jihan is Tuesday. June is Wednesday. Soan is Thursday. Zoa is Friday. Chi is Saturday. And Sujin is Sunday. However, we are never given information as to how this matters in their lore. The only overarching fan theory I saw during the Wii series, was that each era focused on one day and would explain why one member was so heavily focused on. For example, Tag Me was Monday's era, which is why she was so focused on. The girls are seen in uniform and it's bright and early. You can buy that this takes place on a Monday, the first day of the week. Zigzag is said to represent Tuesday, who is Jihan because she was getting most of the focus in that era. While the music video focuses on clubs, you can clearly see that the entire tone and vibe contrasts to Tag Me. Zigzag is very dimly lit and warm. It could represent what an ordinary school day looks like, aka a Tuesday. However, this theory quickly loses any weight by time after school rolls around. If we're going by this theory, June should be next and have a large focus in this era, but she quite simply doesn't. She did a great job of course, but Soan, Monday and Jihan easily overshadowed her. So it begins to beg the question, are the eras done on purpose to represent the days of the week and therefore the girls, or is it simply random who owns that era? Well, I fear ITZY answered this question for us during Not Shy era. See, I told you ITZY and Weekly share a lot in common. Like Weekly, ITZY's releases was followed with fan theories that each girl was picked to own an era. For It's Different, it's Yajai. For It's Icy, it's Yuna, and with Rujin's shoulder dance in It's Me era, it pretty much confirmed to the public that each girl will have a representative era to shine. However, this fan theory was debunked by the girls themselves during Not Shy era. They stated that who owns the era is not up to them, nor is it pre-planned out. It's simply who the fans gravitate towards during it. I believe that this is the same case with Weekly. 5 releases in, and I can't see how any girl who isn't Jihan, Soan and Monday can be allowed to shine when these 3 get most of the singing parts, center parts, and are pushed the most. Sure, there are things that can help, such as hairstyle changes, in which June and Chi did go through during We Play and Holiday Party, Play Game. However, when most people think of these eras, more likely than not, your mind is going to at the very least first go to Soan, who carried much of the iconic melody of these 2 title tracks. Soan is Thursday, so how exactly is she able to dominate 2 titles at a time when there are girls who haven't had their representative era yet? Did you see how the theory then falls apart? Even if the days are out of order, there is still a major flaw in the system itself. And now, especially with the release of Vampera, where Soan and Monday undoubtedly carried again, it's looking impossible to ever follow through with such a premise. For as much emphasis is on Weekly having representative days, it's never utilized in a cool way. It's simply just there for us to speculate on but never get any confirmation from the releases. Therefore, it's not lore. There's nothing here. Weekly also had representative planets. These planets are, Zoa as Venus, Jihan as Mars, Chi as Saturn, Soan as Jupiter, Monday as the Moon, which I hate to be nitpicky about, but the Moon is a satellite, not a planet. Not only is this taught in school, in which you place these 7 girls in for 3 goddamn music videos, but a quick Google search it would also tell you it isn't. But whatever. June is Mercury and Sujin is the Sun, which again, a star, not a planet. What I find hilarious about this is that it's clear these were picked with intent. Clearly June being small ass Mercury is intentional, but once again, this could never be implemented in their actual music nor music videos. For a character whose representative planet is essentially the Sun, aka what our entire solar system revolves around, Sujin has yet to have an era in which she's the focus, and the one in which she does, she sounds awful, and Soan and Monday are easily overshadowing her, so it's so counterproductive. To be fair, once again, this problem exists within recent Luna releases as well, but the difference with Luna is that we have solos that represent backstories and subunit releases that play as episodes where the story takes place. We may not be updated on certain girls' story because of their lack in line distribution, Vivi, Yojin and Galwan, but we were given a piece of their story nonetheless. This is not the case with Weekly, and I fear it could never be the case. The music videos will always be focused on who sings the most, and even when the group releases director cuts, they never are rich with some sort of lore artifacts that we missed from the initial cut. It's just cool shots. Nothing more, nothing less. I was hoping when the trailer released that at the very least they were going more for Sailor Moon than Luna, but indeed I was disappointed by witnessing before me the ever-glorification, paint the town on a budget music video that was Vampera. So no. Weekly's lore was not a worthy reason for a concept switch, being that it was already poorly written and visually laid out to begin with. A silly story is not worth throwing away a brand identity that you built with 4 releases. Weekly was literally never a group known for their lore, and for a reason quite clearly. I advise people to stop treating it as if it was because you're giving way too much credit for bare-bone laziness and trend following. Another thing that goes into brand recognition is consistency. For 3 releases, Weekly became known as the group who uses props on stage for choreography. While props are certainly not something that started with weeekly, as far as 4th gen goes, it was definitely something they brought back to the limelight. It made them interesting and unique and added a punch to their choreo, which if you looked closely would be pretty dull without it. see Holiday Party and Vampera as proof of that. I understand that with pop choreography, it can create an issue for the girls when promoting the song without it. However, they've performed after school about 1,000,000 times without the skateboards and chairs and they seem just fine. If it's possible for a choreography to exist for regular, standard performances, then it boggles me as to why they would stop doing something that has become so iconic to their brand. Little things such as this makes them stand out in an ocean worth of 4th-gen groups, let alone groups with cute concepts, because this much thought is never put into the releases if you're not, of course, wise. It's no wonder why people began to turn away. When you slowly begin to peel away aspects of a group that was thoroughly enjoyed by everyone, let alone allowed easy praise towards the girls, you're essentially stripping away a level of excitement. This year they've resorted to changing their logo. At first I was on board with it, but the more I look at it, the more I long back for their copper black planet logo that encapsulated the group's energy much better than this new one. This one gives me very solar feels and like I've now well established, that is not the group Weekly set themselves up to be. Even with Vampera being as fiery as it is, I guess meaning to represent the sun as with the awfully auto-tuned I'm burning up, it still doesn't make much sense to be their new official logo. That's one song in a discography of kids pop music. It's jarring. I'm genuinely hoping it's only for this release and they'll go back to their original logo. Once again, brand recognition, dude. Also at the point that you're making the logo look like a sun, why not just leave out the Saturn ring? It's so dumb looking. I'm sorry. The lack of brand recognition also is an issue. I think another part that was inevitably going to lead to the downfall of Holiday Party was how drastically different it looked to anything weekly released prior. Now you can say this is the initial issue with trilogies in K-pop to begin with. The release that follows will always feel a bit foreign visually because it would make no sense for previous visual consistency. For example, the school setting, to continue if the body of work for that visual consistency has now come to an end. However, I don't think the solution to that is to just stuff a bunch of generic set designs in your music video with the least interesting shots on earth and hope that the popularity from your previous release will ensure this one's success. I think Holiday Party was a cute era, but it definitely lacked all the charm that made Weekly themselves. No prop choreography, no school setting, the teasers were bland, generic and could be done by any group given $10, and even the album cover was so painfully boring for a group that utilized color so well in their main work. I mean, Jung drew the third album cover. It may not have been my favorite, but it was something at least competent and matched the energy of the group. Could we not have just tossed her in a room with a notepad and a marker and call it a day? So in the end, Holiday Party was bound to tank because it sucked all the brand recognizable aspects out of a group whose branding was the entire reason for their popularity. I find it lame to blame fans for not flocking to support a release that they just didn't seem as good as their others, let alone something that Weekly would do. Which ultimately leads me to my final point and bone to pick with this entire concept switch situation. Why do we blame ourselves when we should blame the company? Throughout this video, you've noticed that I spoke way more about Weekly's previous years than I did of this recent release. That's because speaking about Vampera would simply be pointless. I knew by the time the badly cropped weird black background teasers came out that it wasn't going to be good. The CGI trailer they dropped were no more awful than the animation that SH provides, and yet everyone seemed to be more easy on Weekly for some reason. I knew a disaster was coming. I knew I wouldn't like it. I don't think I have to sit here and speak to why Vampera is awful for you to understand why it's awful, especially for Weekly. It's just that this release has now ticked up an uproar of people not speaking about it but instead Holiday Party, and how we all failed Weekly and should be ashamed. It's a narrative that I can no longer get behind, and I think it represents a dangerous precedent moving forward if we continue to preach it, one that essentially begins to side and be sympathetic with companies rather than treat music as what it really is, an art form of entertainment to be digested differently by each individual. It is not our fault that Holiday Party flopped and therefore Weekly switched their concept. It's their company's fault, and it's always going to be the company's fault. First to begin, their company simply failed to capitalize on the hype that After School gave them. This isn't even new to Weekly, as their company equally fumbled following up Tag Me with Zigzag. Now personally, I enjoy all of these songs. However, it's so painfully obvious how each follow-up to a song that becomes widely loved from Weekly essentially births a song that's similar in sound but lacking the literal charm that made its predecessor blow up. As standalones, Zigzag and Holiday Party are good songs. But when you put it in the context that Zigzag was the comeback to Tag Me, and Holiday Party was the follow-up to After School, you begin to realize the dip in quality between the releases. They just aren't good songs to follow up after super hyped releases that have become cult essentials in 4th gen playlists. It's a poor decision, and that's not the fans' fault for not blindly enjoying every release, it's the producers and the company's fault for making subpar copies of two popular hits for the group. After School's chorus is a earworm, Holiday Parties is simply not. In fact, most people forgot how the chorus went after the first week. That was never going to work out for them. This narrative that we failed Weekly and should have forced ourselves to enjoy Holiday Party is essentially saying, hey, we have to support every good concept release, even if the music is subpar, mediocre, because if we don't we'll be punished with a concept switch. It's almost like fear-mongering via music, concepts. Why do we as cute concept stans have to enjoy every release in order to further receive music in that concept genre when companies have been throwing mediocre girl crush music at the wall for 2 years for little actual impact in their home country? Girl groups have not been threatened of concept switches because of their girl crush anthems that South Koreans clearly despise ranking, so why exactly do we have this ridiculous notion when it comes to cute concepts? Why do we blame ourselves instead of blaming companies for their incompetence that leads to the low sales to begin with? After School was popular for a reason. It's proof that you can make a cute concept song that is popular in this generation. So why on earth would Holiday Party tanking result in a concept switch? Did you see how the logic makes no sense and how our opinions actually don't matter as much as we think? I do understand that at the end of the day, companies have to make money. The issue is that none of them want to continue with the work it takes for the monetary gain of their groups to start trolling in. Weekly is clearly fighting against a tide of 4th gen girl crush concepts. They were never going to be on its level of fame right away, especially coming from a company with 2 known groups. However, their career should have been more of a long-term bet. Their consistency of releasing cute concept music will pay off in the long run, in which the industry gets so tired of girl crush. Every new release that is not girl crush is therefore a breath of fresh air and receives much more appreciation in hindsight. It was a strategy that was bound to pay off for them, and I don't understand why their company instead folded and gave into a concept that simply doesn't fit the girls. So-won and Monday looked amazing, but they are the aces of the group. They will always look amazing regardless of concept. However, members such as Jihan, Jun, and Ji, with young faces and squeezable cheeks, look awkward in the Vampire music video, let alone the stages and mutable TikToks they've been doing. That doesn't even factor in that half the group just doesn't have the voices to carry this song. Sujin, Ji, Jun, Jihan and Zoa sound awful. It shocked me. Sure, half of them always got throwaway lines, but their delivery in their title tracks were never this bad. The worst we ever got was the yo rap in After School, and I would proudly take that any day than having to listen to Weekly sing Vampire again. I think we need to stop blaming ourselves for concept switches, especially when it comes to cute concept groups. It more so speaks to the juvenile mindset of companies that they think every release from a group with an unpopular concept needs to be a hit, rather than building a cult or niche audience that clearly appreciates the work you put out. The best example of this has to be Dreamcatcher, who fought to be heard in an industry full of candy-colored pop hooks and easily digestible melodies. It's more proof to me that companies who are willing to build an image and distinct sound for their group will always come out on top, even if the sales don't meet the highest expectations. Groups should not be treated as just a chart position. When they are, we are subjected to awful or at the very least subpar music that never measures up to the rest of their work. See Dream Note's drastic switch to Ghost. It may not be a bad song, but it's just not as good as their previous work. Elris's Jackpot, was it bad? No. Hardly, but you listen to Pow Pow in a heartbeat before ever putting it on. I bet you can list some artists whose concept switch has not equaled in the quality of music improving but rather drastically imploding on their discography. That's really the issue with drastic concept switches to begin with. What's truly the point of rebranding a group if your intentions aren't to show a drastically improved sound and look that justifies the switch? I mean, for God's sake, Weekly's teasers look like they were cropped out on PixArt and the styling is hilariously cheap. The music video was equally awful to match its painfully awful song. No effort was made to convince us that this change would show us a new side to Weekly because that was never the intention with it. It was all just a ploy for a quick buck and attention that girl crush brings. You can argue the same thing about Holiday Party as well. There was no attempt to convince us that this new vision that their company has for their group is superior to what we've previously been exposed to. What I want you to take away from this video is not that this is just an issue with Weekly but an issue with this generation of K-pop specifically, and that it's not going to change by forcing ourselves to love every song that isn't in the girl crush realm. You are only fooling yourself if you think pretending to like music is going to lead to more of that genre being made. Instead, I suggest that we digest art the way it's meant to be, individual by individual. It's okay if you didn't like this cute concept song. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're a hater of all cute concepts and the sole reason as to why no group does it anymore. I think placing such a huge responsibility on fans to consume what they like mindlessly to get more of it is abusive. Instead, demand better music from that genre, concept. We are worthy of good cute concept songs. Don't let this Weekly situation make you fearful of giving your honest opinion. It does no good for our community nor the music.
Who fuck is it?
You're a funny morals from hate.
It's over. That's it. Okay? That's all I gotta say.